Let's continue our conversation here in the foyer of the House of Commons. I'm joined by Shelly Glover, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance, and by Peter Julian, the finance critic for the Democratic Party. And in the next couple of minutes, we may slide the finance critic for the Liberals, Scott Bryson, in here when he joins us, if he makes it in time, given that we're live and everything else. Shelly Glover, why is this the right budget for Canada right now?
Well, it's the right budget for Canadians because it's focusing on jobs, on growth, and long-term prosperity. That is the title of the budget, and that is the big focus of this budget. And Canadians across this country are going to see in these 500 pages things that are going to help them to be employed, to stay employed, and to get employed. They're going to see things in this budget that are going to help them if they are disabled, if they are Aboriginal, if they are suffering from some kind of disincentive to work. They're going to see that this budget is really going to help them, and I'm very proud of it, and I think Canadians are going to be very happy with it. Of course, it's not at all what was being rumored in the media, etc. It's very modest. It's moderate. There are efficiencies that have been found in government in this budget. $5.2 billion in efficiencies have been found. And we're also setting an example in this budget. As you have seen, parliamentarians are going to be taking a hard look at their pensions. They're going to be reducing our pensions contributions to the point where it is 50-50, so that it's more like what we see in the private sector.
As will public servants. Over time.
Yes.
Peter Julian, why is it the wrong budget for the country?
Well, the only aspect of jobs is the title. When you look at actually what's in the budget, what we're seeing is a push up in the retirement age from 65 to 67, which will quadruple the poverty rate among seniors in the coming years. So for future seniors, this is not a good budget. When you look at the service cuts as well, Peter, just right across the board, we're seeing service cuts in food safety and transportation safety. In some cases, the government's playing a bit of a shell game. They're putting a little money up front. But when you look over the next couple of years, we're looking at substantial cuts. And for the government to throw 19,000 people out of work over the next little while, and to say that somehow they're creating jobs, it simply doesn't wash.
Yeah, let's be clear on all the numbers. Just when we talk about the 19,000 jobs, right? It's 19,000 positions being eliminated from the federal public service, some of which are empty now, vacant now. But the total numbers,
most of which aren't.
Well, the total, yeah, exactly. I'm going to get to that. What we're told is that in the budget, that it's the actual number of people that will be going out the door who want to work and who are not going to have jobs is 12,000. So that's the size of the actual cuts being made in the public service.
And thank you for correcting the misinformation that's just being perpetrated.
Well, that's what's in the budget, 19,000.
19,000 positions are gone.
They're saying 7,000 attrition. I just don't trust them.
Yeah.
But let's also fix what was said there. I mean, seniors are going to be happy with some of the things in these budgets. They want an OAS, an old age security pension, when they reach 65 years of age, of course. But we have to make sure it's sustainable in the future. When we're talking
about those,
you've got to be
kidding, Peter.
Let Shelly Glover finish, and we'll have time for it.
You can't spread this false information, expect me to just sit here and not correct it, particularly when you're talking about job cuts, because many of these folks are going to get these workforce adjustments when they leave public service. Many of them are actually looking forward to that. But when it comes to seniors, there are many things in this budget, like the third quarter project that was actually developed in Manitoba through the Chamber of Commerce, that is helping those seniors who have actually retired but didn't like retirement and they still want to contribute, they want to work. It's going to pair them up with their skills to small businesses, etc., so that they can continue to work. It's going to give them that advantage. It's going to help them to do that.
Peter, you've got to be kidding. When Ms. Glover says that seniors are going to be happy about being forced to work 2 more years, she's forgetting one important thing, that the level of disability at that age, at 65 to 67, is much, much higher. And what we're seeing, actually, is that most of those people will be unable to work. And so forcing them to work is one thing. That being able to work, actually having the ability to work, not being disabled, is another. So we're talking about quadrupling the poverty rate among seniors. That's what the government is proposing today. And for Ms. Glover to say seniors will be happy with working 2 more years, it stands just how out of touch this government is.
I didn't say that either.
Let me ask, when you talked a little bit about sending a message, and one of those messages is that public servants are going to be expected to pay more of their own way when it comes to the pension plan, which is now, from a contributions aspect, 40% from the public servants, 60% from the government, i.e. the taxpayers of Canada.
Right.
And what is the message you want to send by making those changes to public service pensions?
Well, the message that's being sent to not just public servants, but to parliamentarians and to all of Canadians is that we're being fair. And that is the goal, is to be fair and to make sure that all of these things are sustainable in the long run. We cannot become lax about these things. We've seen what's happened in Europe. We've seen what's happened in even some of our own provinces. We must look to the long-term vision of this country and ensure that these things are sustainable. That's why OAS is so important. 7 workers used to pay for every person 65 years of age, and that was when it first, in 1970. 4 workers now pay for OAS recipients. 2 will be paying for it in 2030.
Peter,
and it'll go to 108 billion.
I want to hear you.
The government's own actuarial tables showed that OAS was sustainable in the long term. The Parliamentary Budget Officer did an analysis, showed that OAS is sustainable in the long term. Now, this government is choosing F-35 fighter jets at $30 or $40 billion. Their massive prison program, which they've never actually been costed, but they're saying for seniors, you got to work 2 more years and you better be happy about it. And if you're disabled and you're living in poverty, we just don't care. That is profoundly unfair.
Where does the NDP stand on asking public servants to pay their share, a full 50% share of the contributions to their own pension plan?
Well, you've got to remember that for public servants, this is actually, in the public sector, the area where there's more equality between women and men. So when you attack those public pensions, what you're saying to women in the private sector who are earning much less than men, but in the public sector are working, they're actually getting closer than men. What you're saying is for public sector workers who are going into those retirement plans, that they're going to be hit yet again. Women have been disadvantaged in the private sector. Wow. They have been, there's more equality, of course, in the public sector. And the interesting thing is, men in the public sector actually paid less than men in the private sector. No, but women, it's the opposite.
That is spin.
Hang on a second.
No, that's not spin. That's a reality. It's an analysis that's been done.
What I'm asking you is, should a public sector employee pay 50% of the contributions into their own pension plan while the taxpayers pay the other 50%?
We want to make sure that the public sector system is sustainable in the long term.
So is that a good idea in this budget?
Well, no. We're saying in the long term, the pension system publicly is sustainable, and of course, in the long term, the OAS is sustainable. And what this government is doing is playing a shell game. Now, you'll know, Peter, from the budget documents themselves, all they've said is after the next election, they may deal with MPs' pensions. But there's been actually nothing in this document that shows that they're tackling MPs' pensions. They're putting it off to after the next election. So I think that's a little unfair to target. I think 2013 for public sector pensions, not for MPs' pensions.
For MPs' pensions, it talks about a similar approach to them to take effect in the next Parliament.
After the next election. After the next election. It's because Conservative MPs reacted very strongly against the idea that they should go the same route as public sector pensions. Yeah. So that shows a hypocrisy, I think.
That's not
We've
true.
said all along that MPs' salaries and MPs' pensions should be put off to an independent body. It shouldn't be MPs deciding this. And when you look at this budget document, the contradiction between how they're treating public sector pensions and how they're treating MPs' pensions, I think that shows that the NDP was right.
Let's finish on this. You'll get a chance to weigh in on that if you want to, but let's finish on this. The finances of the government appear to be pretty good, as they're certainly better than expected right now. The budget deficit projection is down by $8 billion from what it was just in November. So there are some people looking at this and saying, you know, this is a problem in terms of the deficit balancing the budget that was on the way to taking care of itself, even if you did nothing in this budget. But also, if you look at the timing of it, the government actually erases the deficit just before we go into the next election campaign, when people are pointing out that it could have been erased before that. But so tell me about the timing as an election strategy to deal with it just before Canadians go back to the polls, to be able to say, look, we got it all under control. You don't want to change horses now. We fixed it, but there's still more work to be done, when it might have been fixed a year and a half or 2 years earlier than that.
Well, this government has been very consistent about the message with regards to getting back to balanced budgets. We have maintained a low tax agenda. We have said we are not going to do anything that would actually affect the provinces and transfers to people. We maintained that. We are on track exactly as we said we would be. But let's never forget that this is a very fragile global economy. We must always be cautious because we see what's happening in Europe. We know that the United States still has some challenges ahead of them. Some of our provinces have challenges ahead of them.
But are you erasing the deficit just in time to go into the next election campaign?
But that was never the intent of this. You saw that there's a $20 billion risk as well. We've put some risk into the budget because we're trying to be very cautious about what's happening around us. But I'm really disappointed about all the spin that you're hearing. I'm sitting here as a Conservative telling you I think what's going to happen to our pensions is fair. He's telling you he doesn't want to tell you. I'm sitting here telling you that the job creation in this budget is good. Aboriginal people are going to benefit from this budget. I want to see that those folks get these benefits, and I hope that these NDP members will vote for it.
In the own document, the government admits unemployment's going up this year. So for the government to even pretend that it's a job-creating budget when they admit that unemployment is going to go up, when they go in the face of the rating agencies that said, don't make these significant cuts, don't shed thousands of jobs because it's not good because of the weakening of the Canadian economy. We've lost tens of thousands of jobs over the last few months because this government has not done effective economic management. And now today we get the bad news that there are going to be thousands of more families with a breadwinner out on the street.
Okay. You need to read it closer because what Peter said was right. We're in very good shape. In fact, the IMF, the OECD say we are right at the top of the pack.
The IMF said don't make significant cuts.
OECD
the IMF said that. The rating agencies said that.
I just said what
Canadians are right, and they'll be reacting over the next few days.
Appreciate both of you joining me. Thanks very much. Let's go to my colleague.